you don't need to focus on the highest volume keyword. You need to focus on the one that has the most buyer intent, because would you rather have 1 in 10 leads convert or 1 in 1,000? So focus on identifying where the money is and use tools to understand where the buyer intent is within those phrases.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Marketing Inc. As always, I've got an incredible guest for you, Mr. Damon Burton. Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Allie. Excited to jump in. You and I, we're going to get to know each other ourselves. We've only chatted a time or two, so this will be fun.
Absolutely. I'm very excited about it. Definitely have seen your work online for quite some time. I think your reputation certainly precedes you. You've got an amazing business at SEO National, and I know that the audience is going to be able to certainly learn a lot from you. So for people who may not be familiar with you that are listening or watching right now, why don't you just kind of bring us up to speed and tell us a little bit about how you got to this place in your life and in your business.
Yeah, so I've run an SEO agency for 18 years, worked with cool people like Tony Robbins, Brunson, a couple of professional sports teams. Probably some of my favorites are the mom and pops. We have amazing retention. I still have client number 1 that is paid every month for 18 years.
That's amazing.
So we've worked with a lot of cool people, a lot of success stories, taking little businesses up to, big scale. My origin story is pretty interesting. My background was originally design, and the agency that I worked for, I had the opportunity to work from home. They wanted me to work in Las Vegas. My wife and I were newly married. I knew we'd have kids on the horizon, and I just kind of wanted to stay in Utah where we're still at. And so I got to work from home, and then fast forward a year or two, and the gentleman that ran this company got into some legal trouble from the business before. And so they kind of had it out for him, and they came after him for that business, which then brought down the second business. So I abruptly found myself without a job, and I had 3 choices, and it was, okay, see if this pans out and I do have a job. 2 was go find a new job, or 3 was bet on myself. So I had enough side clients that I did the math, and it seemed like, okay, I might be house poor, but at least I can pay the bills. And that's probably as safe as a bet that I'm ever going to get. So I took the leap of faith, and 18 years later, I built up a multimillion-dollar business, and we've done it purely off social proof and reputation, and have run 0 ads.
I love that. I love that. It's so different than what I do, but I love it because so many people are unable to do it ultimately. It's a challenging thing for many businesses when it comes to actually growing, because they don't have anything predictable to allow them to get more leads or bookings or clients, and you've been able to make that happen. And so I'm sure there's definitely got to be some trade-offs there in terms of time potentially, but maybe not. So I would really love to hear a little bit more about how that actually works. I know the audience is going to be interested, but how long had you been in SEO whenever you started this business? How experienced were you in that skill set at this point?
Not really at all. So I've been on the SEO side for 18 years. When the way that it came about was when I took that leap of faith and I had those side clients. The first year and a half, I ran design. So I built up a reputation for building landing pages. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of like feast or famine. I was fortunate enough that back then, it was newly married. We didn't have kids. My wife had a job. And so we didn't have to make a ton. I think that the first year I made, between the side hustle clients and my day job, was like 40 grand. It was nothing crazy. And then when I lost the day job, my income had gone up a little bit, but it was like 50 grand, but now I lost 60% of that. So, it was $20,000 a year. Now what had happened was one of those design clients said, what do you know about Google? And I think this is a fun story to share, because especially for the newer entrepreneurs, one of the first things is like, well, how do I get my first clients? And I'll walk you through what I did. And I now teach other entrepreneurs, and I've had a couple other people do this in the last few months, and it's worked for all of them too. Awesome. So one of them has gone up to $120,000 a year in 5.5 months, $120,000 a month in 5.5 months.
Wow. Amazing.
And so what I did was I went back to this design client and asked, what do you know about Google? And I said, I know enough that I think I can help you, but I don't know enough that I feel confident charging you. Mm-hmm. So you set these expectations where it's not going to be perfect. Yeah. And then I said, how about we work out this arrangement where if and when we hit these goals, you don't owe me anything until we hit that. And then if we hit it, you owe me retroactively, and we start a retainer.
Love that.
the amount of trust you bring and goodwill into the relationship, they have nothing to lose, and either they walk away free or they have a marketing program that works. Mm-hmm. And so I did that and it worked out really well. And then I extended that to a second client and I said, that was fun. Let's see if I can take this somewhere. And I always knew in the beginning, I didn't want to be an agency that offered everything. And so when this came up, I said, maybe this is the thing. So let's give it enough time to see if SEO is the thing. Extended to the second client, worked also. And so then I went all in at that point.
I really do love that, because that is certainly a question that I get asked. And I have similar recommendations to what you shared. But the funny thing is that a lot of people are unwilling to do that for whatever reason. You either have to put in the legwork early on without being paid by anybody, teaching yourself, or paying for others to teach you and getting that skill set to where you do feel really confident that you can deliver these results, or you have to learn on the job. I think there's nothing better than actually learning on the job, but doing it in an ethical way where you are ensuring that you're not taking advantage of somebody who has expectations that far exceed what you feel confident doing. It's a good way to go ahead and get your feet wet. And like you said, you can keep doing that over and over again, and you can build up a really nice business and a great reputation, a reputation that even when you fail or when you don't hit the goals that maybe you were hoping you would achieve, there's not a negative connotation with you or your business or your brand, and you still have a good relationship with that person ideally, so that you can go ahead and move forward, potentially even getting referrals or recommendations, in the future as time goes on. So, okay, you really dove into this hands-on, learning as much as you could on the job. You figured out you really liked it. Was this something you said, hey, I'm very into this, or you just saw this as a really scalable business that you wanted to center your services around?
I enjoyed it. There was something about it I enjoyed. Money has never been the primary driving factor for whatever reason. Obviously, it's a top factor, and the incentive and the rewards was always a consideration, but it was never the number one decision. I was at a mastermind about 2 years ago, and I was speaking, and I had an interesting question. Somebody asked me, what took you so long? And I knew the answer, but it was just interesting having somebody third party ask that. And what they meant was, why did it take you so long to get to X amount of revenue? And it was very intentional because I never wanted to scale at the expense of my sanity. Absolutely. And so you usually sacrifice your sanity, your health, or your relationships. And so my wife and I, we've been together 21 years now. We've been married for 18, and we have a great relationship, love her more than ever. We have kids that we have a strong relationship. And so for me, it was always the financial incentive was not so much for personal reward, but to provide stability for a family. Mm-hmm. And so a couple of years ago, I asked myself, do I still enjoy this? Because that's a long time to be doing the same thing. Yes. And I was nervous at first when that thought crossed my head, because I thought, well, what if I just expose myself and maybe I am just incentivized? And what I realized was I do still enjoy it because of two things. SEO is predictable enough on the day-to-day that you know what you're walking into, but it's also ever changing enough to keep it attractive and diverse, mm-hmm. to have some sort of pique your interest on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, I feel really similar about paid ads. I think everybody who doesn't know what they don't know, they're going to say, oh my gosh, it's not predictable at all, or there's way too much that I don't know. But when you really do enjoy something, you need there to be some variation. You need some things to change. And even when sometimes those changes might be frustrating, they do keep you on your toes, and they do really push you to continue trying new things, to improve, be better in different areas. So the clients that you were working with in those early days, what types of businesses were they? Did you have any idea what types of businesses you felt like would be the best option as clients, or that you had any indication might be able to get better results? Or did you just take whoever was interested in having you on board?
Somewhere in the middle. I've never taken anybody. I back then and still to this day, I decline a lot. I'm probably more picky now, but I've always had a little bit of that. We have a full page in our agreements that says reasons not to hire us. Mm-hmm. And what's really important for entrepreneurs is like all the things that you're scared to do are exactly the things that you should do. And so when you set those expectations of the types of clients you want to engage with and the ones that you don't, and you filter those out, of course you want the money, but is that, like I said, is that money worth your integrity or your sanity? And so these short-term, I don't want to say losses in declining clients, but they turn into long-term rewards by being able to deliver a better product and work with better people. So in the beginning, there wasn't really an industry, and there still isn't an industry. And that bothered me for a while because we all hear the thing, riches are in the niches and things like that. And so for a long time, I thought, what is the audience that we want to focus on? Now I think it served me well because we're big enough now that we're not niched, that our superpower has always been SOPs, and so we can roll this out to any industry.
Mm-hmm.
But now if I were, the dentist SEO guy, then I would have built a reputation in one vertical, which would filter me out from the opportunity to work with all these other clients who I work with now.
Yeah, no, I think that is really smart, especially when it comes to marketing yourself early on. I do think the niches are very powerful, but it's not all that there is out there. I have a feeling that I'd be extremely bored if I worked with the same type of business every single day. I like having that variety. It's not for everyone. But if you do have a system and a structure and a strategy behind what you're doing, in theory, it should be able to be replicated between different types of businesses. They might need some commonalities, of course, but I totally agree. Now, the big question I think that people listening might have already is, how did you end up working with people like Tony Robbins and Russell Brunson that you mentioned? Those are obviously extremely well-known influencers, entrepreneurs, big names, and those types of relationships do not happen very easily. So how did you get in a position to be able to work with that type of person? And is that the type of people that you are currently focused on working with even more?
Yeah, it's both of them are different stories, and they're both fun stories. We still don't have a segmented demographic that we go after. There are certainly businesses that we don't go after, but in general, the number one priority in who we onboard is they can't be jerks. And so there's no amount of money you could pay me at this point to sacrifice my own sanity or the integrity of the team. So really, it's about who's the point of contact, because there's some industries where, lawyers, for example, in general, are more complicated clients to work with because they're so busy doing other things, and they're not necessarily marketing savvy. But one of our best clients is an attorney because the point of contact is not the attorney.
Yeah.
And so it's, there's different nuances to each client. Russell, I'll do Russell and Tony. Russell came about just by basically all clients have come through building up a reputation of giving. And so I always, if anybody follows me on any platform, you'll see that I always just give the answers. I don't gate anything. And what I realized is the type of client that takes there's generally three types of content consumers from my position. The first one is the type of reader that takes your content and runs. And so they were never your client to lose anyway, but now you just helped somebody and you expanded your reach and your reputation. The second type of content consumer is the person that may need what you offer later or knows somebody that needs what you offer. And so then that becomes a lead later. Or then, of course, the third one is the person that needs your thing and buys. So when I realized that, I just started giving away everything, because the person that takes my stuff and runs is not my client anyway. I want the person that values time more than money. So I started putting out a lot of content and being intentional about sharing. And then I'm in Russell Brunson's inner circle, and so then him and I got exposed to each other a little deeper that way. And then within that mastermind, I continue to take the same approach and give. And so at some point, he started asking me questions, and he'd just shoot me a message on my phone, and I would just help. I would just reply. I wouldn't follow up. I wouldn't ask him if he wanted me to do SEO. I would just answer his question. And then that type of engagement went from once every couple months to once every couple weeks to once every couple days to finally he just says, why don't I just hire you? Yeah. So that was Russell. Tony's is shorter and really interesting. Even I didn't expect Tony. So Perry Belcher made a post, and Perry makes a post like every 6 months that says something about SEO. And then out of 100 comments, I get tagged 60 times. And Perry will message me, and then we'll go back and forth, but then I don't hear anything. Well, this time Perry made a post, and Tony's guy messaged me, and he says, hey, I saw you in this thread, and I'm just trying to skip all the fluff. Here are some things we're looking for. Are you taking on new clients? And so I sent him my calendar. He booked a call. There's generally three things that I focus on helping a lead within the scope of SEO, and I just hit those three things. I happen to answer his concerns, and closed him from a Perry Belcher post.
That's amazing. I think it is really just a powerful reminder that, other people can be your best sales team. You didn't have to try and pitch him. He was able to find you simply because, like you said, you are giving things away. You're making it known from a content perspective what you do, so that if somebody has not had the opportunity to work with you or collaborate closely with you, they know what it is you focus on. And ultimately being able to do a great job is going to make sure that you have a lot of raving fans or people that at bare minimum would not risk. They would not be concerned about risking their name and their reputation and their integrity by referring you. I think it's so powerful. I mean, if somebody goes out on a limb, even to tag you, it's important to them that they can stand behind that. At least that's how I feel. People are very selective a lot of the time about who they recommend. And so that definitely speaks volumes, but getting out that content, making sure that, you do see people in those different categories, I think is brilliant, because you're exactly right. People are too concerned about keeping their best stuff hidden. You're never going to show anybody what you've got or the unique things that make you or your business special if you're keeping it all to yourself. And there's ultimately some differences depending on if it's done for you, done with you, do it yourself style. But you're totally right. Those people that are taking it and running with it, they're more of your peers, your collaborators, people that you may be able to work with in a unique way, but they're not necessarily going to be that end consumer. And so you have absolutely nothing to lose. Well, I think that is amazing. What I would love to do is really dive into, if someone has no SEO presence whatsoever, what is the quickest, easiest, and I say easiest knowing there's not always an easy button, what is the best way that you would approach them in terms of, let's get you ranking really highly, let's get this a really strong strategy that's going to actually produce tangible leads, appointments, or sales within we'll call it a 6 month to a year period. And I know that things are changing a lot. I'm sure AI has definitely changed the way that SEO is either implemented or even the way that people are receiving answers on what they're searching for. But in your opinion, what is an amazing plan for someone to consider in 2025 about how to start building a really solid search presence?
Yeah, the AI thing's a whole other rabbit hole, so I'll let you decide if we go down that one. But the fundamentals of SEO have stayed pretty consistent. So the way that I look at it is the vehicles of those fundamentals have changed. My friend gave a great metaphor where he compared it to like music. And so music used to be record players, then it was 8 tracks, then it's cassettes, then it's CDs, then it's MP3s. So the record player may have went away, but music never went away. And so it's kind of the same thing with SEO. So those 3 fundamentals are really simple. One is, how good or bad is your website built? And so does it load quickly? Is it mobile friendly? Does it have a clean design and clear call to action? 2 is content. You can only show up on search engines for what they can read. So do you have clear, unique, value-added content? And then 3 is what I like to call external credibility. A lot of people will say that's backlinks, which it does encompass that when other websites link to you. But it also includes other things like brand mentions and citations, which are unlinked mentions. So the more that another website mentions or links to you, it counts as a vote in the search engine popularity contest. So as far as SEO is concerned, any algorithm to date, now it may change in the future, but any algorithm to date has fell under one or a combination of those 3 things. So the fundamentals really haven't changed. So now, for the DIYer, the 2 most basic things that have a significant impact that are easy to adopt. One is focus on your page speed. Keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. I consistently, even before my SEO years, when it was just design, I consistently see the most simplistic, bland websites outperform the most over-the-top, visually stunning websites because it's too much. It slows it, either slows the website down or it's too distracting. So you don't need a super fancy design. So just make it load quickly. There's free tools like gtmetrics.com, and it'll tell you how to fix that. So that's probably, I don't like to give too many technical answers, but that one conceptually is pretty easy. Just make it load quickly.
But I also do appreciate the technical answers, so don't be scared if you need to throw some in there.
Yeah. So I would start with that. And then after that, it's really just a content game. A lot of times I take the same thing that we publish on social, at least for me personally in my blog, the same things that I give away on social media, I'll just turn right around and make it as a blog post on my website, because it's generally value added and helps somebody. Yeah. And so the best way to optimize a blog is to not optimize a blog. Don't focus on SEO, focus on giving value-added content. Now, it might not be the most immediately fastest, but it has compounding interest, right? And so the longer you do this, the more value add. Once you get a few people that are going to start sharing your blog, which brings in the backlinks, which brings in readership, which just compounds all these other things and snowballs. So really, I'd keep it simple for the DIYer on those 2 things. Make a clean, fast-loading website, and then just give away as much as you're comfortable with.
I love it. So obviously, from a technical SEO perspective, these algorithms are looking for keywords, etc. How important is that in a strategy that you're putting together for someone? Is your content strategy built with keywords in mind first to focus on, or does it come from putting together really great content and then identifying what the best opportunities are within that piece of content to be able to potentially, rank for short or long tail keywords?
Yeah, good question. So it's a combination. So your SEO strategy should be keyword driven, at least conceptually, from the understanding that you need to understand where the money is. And so usually you can identify where the money is based on the types of search intent. And so beyond that, you want to look at where the buyer intent is. So too many SEOs, I think a big problem with a lot of them is they understand content is important, but they write for the sake of writing instead of writing to attract a pre-qualified lead. Yeah. And so usually what we do is we go, okay, where's the money at? And then there's tools where you can look at where existing search demand is. You don't need to focus on the highest volume keyword. You need to focus on the one that has the most buyer intent. Because would you rather have 1 in 10 leads convert or 1 in 1,000? Yeah. So of course it's the 1 in 10. So focus on identifying where the money is, then use tools to understand where the buyer intent is within those phrases. And so a great example is when you start building out your content calendar, look at topics that focus on time commitments or financial commitments. Because if somebody says, how much does it cost to hire an SEO? They're on the buying journey, right? Yeah. And so look for things like that. After you focus on intent, then what you want to do is build out a consistent content strategy. And there's ways you can diversify that. So because you spend all the time identifying the topics that imply buyer intent, then you can get into diversifying it. So a really simple way is convert text into images, text into videos. And what that does is now Google goes, oh, well, Allie writes about a lot of cool things in different ways. She must be more of an authority. Let's position her higher. But because you also have these different media types, then those results can show up. And now all of a sudden you have, 3 results, the traditional, a video and an image. And then now you also suppress the competition. So if you go content heavy, then that's generally the safest play. There's no such thing as too much good content. So we like to focus on that one because it's a safer play.
Okay. So when you are setting up that initial SEO content strategy, you're looking at those keywords. Is there a number of keywords that you typically want to incorporate into that strategy? Or is it simply saying how many are there that are identifying our ideal customer that we believe we have an opportunity for? Or does the opportunity and competition go into your approach very frequently? What is that right number of keywords to say, I actually have a chance to focus on these, as opposed to maybe keeping it smaller and going really hard on those certain topics?
Yeah, this is a really good question, because you don't want to, just like you don't want to go for the 1 in 1,000, you want to go for the 1 in 10. You don't want to rank for absolutely everything. You want to rank for the things you can monetize. Yeah. So that you don't have to keyword stuff these days. And so when we talk about keywords, really the keywords are to help you identify the trajectory, not to obsess over the keywords. And so a great example is search engines understand the general intent of a topic. And so let's say we'll use the attorney example again. So if I have a client that ranks really well for personal injury attorney, but we never say the word lawyer in the copywriting, they will probably also rank well for lawyer, because Google understands the synonyms between attorney and lawyer. So you don't need to focus on keyword stuffing. You also don't need to do an astronomical volume of content. But the AI thing, I'm just going to briefly touch on because it's such a rabbit hole. Yeah. But nowadays, so many people focus on volume instead of quality. And the majority of our clients, we only still do 2 to 4 blogs a month. We're not doing 10 a month or 10 a week, because it's value-based and intent-driven topics. So really focus on how do you identify the pre-qualified lead, associate serving that audience with the right topic, and then deliver a value-added piece of content.
Yeah, I love it. Does simplify kind of the overwhelm, I think, mentally, when you think about it that way. Now, on the volume topic, volume of content, is there a downside to doing a higher volume of content if you feel confident that the content is quality, that the keywords you're focusing on are correct? Or is it a best practice to stay within that 2 to 4 blog post per month range?
There's no such thing as too much good content. So as long as it is A, unique, not mass-produced, duplicate, spun content, B, value-added and intentional, yeah, you can do as much as you want. Back to, you had asked about how many keywords as well.
Yeah.
And so I like to break that down, what I call core keywords and variable keywords. So the quantity in which you target for me is more about the core keywords. So the general example I always give is, let's say you're a produce farmer and you're selling red apples. And now all of a sudden you want to introduce green apples and yellow apples. Well, green apples and yellow apples will probably pick up pretty quickly because you already have a common denominator of targeting a similar phrase.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden you throw in whatever, tomatoes, right? You have no historical reference to that on your website. And so in that circumstance, we have 4 keywords, but only 2 of them are core keywords, right? Apples and tomatoes. Yeah. And so we focus on the core keywords, and then the variable keywords are a lot more flexible after that. And so what that ends up shaking out is 10 to 20 core keywords per client in a general average. And then it could be 50 to 100 variable keywords. But to your point, it's about what's the fastest path to monetization. So we care more about making the client money than saying you're number one on all these things.
Yeah, definitely. So you mentioned the 20 to 30 core keywords. Is that across the lifetime of that client, or is that within a certain time frame? You know, is that these are the keywords we want to really focus on, and maybe we'll add 1 or 2 in there over time if our offerings change? Or is that, you know, something that you do strategically, maybe within a 12-month period?
Yeah, Allie knows what's up. She's got the good questions. So it depends on how quickly they monetize those. So if you can get them to a monopoly on page 1, then you can kind of redirect some of the resources, because it doesn't take as much effort to sustain a target as it does to get it there. So once it's there, you can kind of redirect some of those resources. So the way that we call it is, you know, we'll put those in maintenance mode, which is basically we'll still touch them, we'll still write content about them, but not as much. And then we'll redirect those resources over to these new targets. Because if you do SEO, you know, ethically and not cut corners, it's pretty hard to screw it up once you're at the top. You know, we have all these algorithm updates that come out, and historically my clients have never had a penalty. So every time an algorithm comes out, they're either neutral or up, because we're not cutting corners. And so there's this compounding impact, positive impact. So if you focus on doing the things right, then you do have the flexibility to put targets on maintenance mode, and then you expand the targets after that to go, okay, you know, we hit the big boys. Now what are the peripheral targets that we can go after?
Gotcha. Does it take just as much effort to try and rank for a very big or high competition, maybe just really valuable keyword, as it does a lesser value keyword? Because maybe that keyword's of great value to somebody else. I mean, is there a weighted scale in terms of identifying these keywords are going to be harder for us, but it's going to be worth a lot more, so we're willing to wait longer or do more? Or is it really getting any of those core keywords to start ranking, regardless of maybe which ones are the primary focus initially? Yeah,
it does vary. Like a really simple way that the listeners can kind of validate, like maybe they have a keyword they have top of mind, they want to kind of test out. There's obviously software you can use that goes deeper, but if you want a really simple way to kind of look at how competitive the landscape would be, is go to Google, search a sample phrase that you think you could monetize, and you're going to look at 2 things. One is up in the top right, there's going to be a toggle that says tools. If you click on that and expand it, it's going to tell you how many competing results are showing up. So those may or may not be direct competitors, but it doesn't matter because they're in your way. They're in the position that you want to monetize. So from an SEO perspective, they are competitors.
Yeah.
And so you can look at the volume of competing results. Now, what you're looking at is, to your point, doesn't mean you target or don't target them, but it helps you set expectations of a time frame. If there's 1 million competing results, that's going to be relatively simpler than 100 million competing results. So then you can kind of gauge based on that. The other thing that you're looking at is who shows up. So if you're in retail, maybe you don't have a lot of volume of competition. Anything below 1 million is relatively easy. And so let's say you have a low volume of competition, but you sell a retail product and Amazon and Walmart show up. Well, then you also have to take into consideration the quality of the competition. So you can look at those 2 things to start to get a baseline of, okay, how many people am I pushing up against, and how big of competitors are they based on a brand perspective.
So when you start working with a new client, you know, you mentioned the 20 to 30 core keywords. What are your expectations with a client typically in terms of what you're going to be able to accomplish within a certain time frame. Because if you are, and this obviously could vary, but you mentioned anywhere between 2 and 4 blogs per month consistently. Well, that's only up to 48 blogs per year. And if there are 20 to 30 keywords, that doesn't seem like a lot of volume per keyword. Or is that not, you don't want to really focus on all 20 to 30 at a time. That first year, maybe you're focusing on 1 to 2 really heavily. So how do you break down the time frame in which you feel like is appropriate, and how much you're going to try and rank for with a client within any given time frame?
Yeah, this is a great question. You're the first person to ever ask this.
Really?
So it breaks down to math, and you're right. So let's make it even simpler for a conversation. Let's say you have 10 targets or 12 targets. So it's an easy month comparison. Let's say you have 12 targets, you write one piece of content a month. So obviously it's going to take 12 months to touch each of those words. Mm-hmm. But what we talked about earlier, the lawyer versus attorney thing, mm-hmm. those would be 2 separate core keywords because they have no synonym. Well, they're synonyms, but they have no exact match verbiage. And so there's still some overlap there, but you're right. That's where you take into consideration either setting expectations with the client or going, hey, we need to be more aggressive if you want to target all these. If you don't want to target all these, then let's kind of benchmark, phase 1. When we get those in Monopoly, then we'll go into phase 2. So there's also a whole other component where a lot of times we'll front load content. Mm-hmm. And so we'll do what we call vanity pages, which are front loaded money pages. And so if it's like, hey, the client either has a higher risk tolerance or a higher budget, let's be more aggressive, then we can batch a bunch of content. So sometimes we'll come in and we'll just front load 20 blog pieces, or we'll build out the main target page and then 20 blog pieces that point to that main target page. So yeah, you're right. It really boils down to math. How many mm-hmm. keywords are you going after and how many pieces of content can you push out to support it equals expectations on how long it's going to take.
Okay, awesome. So you mentioned the vanity pages, or I think you called them main content pages. Is that like a pillar page? Mm-hmm. Am I thinking the same thing? So that is still a good strategy to utilize in SEO, is really focusing on longer form, more detailed explanation based or education based pages, or does it not have to be a 7,000 word blog in order to count as that type of content?
Yeah, it does. Pillar pages are definitely still a thing. I wouldn't consider the qualification of it being the length of the content, but what we're trying to factor in is how do you signal to Google where the main call to action is, like where the main solution to the searcher's problem is. Okay. And so you don't want to dilute the value of your website by having a variety of really high value added pieces of content. And so you should have some sort of clustering or interconnectivity between the main call to action pillar page and what are the pages that hyperlink to it. So each of these links signals to Google, this is the main thing that solves the problem, and we're just kind of giving you a taste test over here. So you should have a dedicated page where the collective efforts are trying to guide the search results to.
Okay. So for example, I really specialize in meta ads. Would I have one primary page that says, the small business owner's ultimate guide to meta ads, how to master Facebook and Instagram? And then in this post, I'm going to start with the problem they experience. I'm going to dive into the individual pieces that impact results. I'm going to do a deeper explanation into best practices on each of those things, and then ultimately link out from that page to, all right, this is our post on how to run conversion ads. This is our post on how to use lead forms. This is our post on how to automate follow-up, or this is our post on using dynamic creative. But they're all referenced in the main page, so it's still a part of the solution, but we just don't go as in depth on those individual things because it's already so comprehensive to begin with. Is that a good overview?
Correct.
Or okay.
Yeah. Yes. So the general idea is to create like an interconnected guide. So the way that you outlined it is correct. So you'd have a main overview, and then you'd have supporting specialty topics that are all interconnected.
Gotcha. And blogs are still the number one way to do all of this. You don't have to create a ton of, service related pages, and it's not so much about the core pages on your website. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, it is. So the blogs should support the core pages. So the that's where we go, okay, what are the main money pages, the pillar pages? And so you should have a top navigation that says, services, and then within it, the specificity of what those services are. And then all of the blog content points upward to those money pages. And then there's some other technical things that we can get into. You said you don't mind a technical thing, so I'll give you like one other example where it sounds like the majority of what we're talking about is like service-based industries. There is what's called a markup. So it's a little sister language to HTML called schema. And when a search engine goes to your website, it scans the content, looks for links in the body, follows the links, finds new content, scans it, and then repeats. And so what it does when it scans that content, it makes educated guesses and assumptions. Well, I think Allie offers meta ads because she talked about it here. Mm-hmm. But what there is you can add this little schema on the back end. It's not displayed visually on the front end. You usually put it in the same place you put tracking pixels. You put it in the head of your page. And what it does is it goes, oh, Google, I'm going to tell you definitively that my name's Allie. This is the name of my company. These are the services that I offer. And so now Google goes, oh, well, Allie took the time to better communicate this. So now I trust it more because I have more clarity. And because I can trust it more, I can position it higher. And so what you want to do is identify your core money pages, add schema that define either the service or product type, because there's service schema and product schema. And then your blog content should point upwards to that main money page.
Very interesting. So I'm just thinking about all of the things I've done wrong or completely neglected when it comes to SEO. So ultimately, we do have the opportunity to write content a little bit easier than before if you are not a professional copywriter or it's not a skill that you have or thoroughly enjoy. How much of a downside or a negative can it be to utilize AI-based copywriting for these pages, or is there a downside?
Yeah, so I've been pretty vocal about over the last, let's see, we say since AI came out, we're generally talking about when ChatGPT came out, which as of now is about 2.5 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I've been pretty vocal about being sensitive to how you integrate AI. AI is great. Like, I don't have to explain why AI is amazing. Where I've told people to have some sensitivity is only on the content output side. So use it for research, use it for automations, use it for all that stuff. But when it comes to content output, it amplifies a problem that's historically existed. AI is kind of like money. Money, when you fall into money, it's either if you're
good or bad.
Yeah, like it's just going to make you a good person more good, a bad person more bad. Yeah. And so it's like it's going to make a good marketer better. It's going to make a lazy marketer lazier.
Yeah.
And so what happens is Google came out with this algorithm update forever ago, 2012, called Panda. And what it focused on was unique value-added content, because back then, the way that AI exists now is fundamentally not new from an SEO position. So what I mean by that is AI largely takes existing content from some sort of source or database, and you can mass produce it at scale. Now, the version of that existed before was called spinning content. And there was content spinners where you would take content from your competitor or Wikipedia, paste it in, and it would shuffle the paragraphs and sentences and swap out synonyms. Mm-hmm. We just have a way fancier tool that does it now with AI. Yeah. And so when AI came out, I said, hey, I get why it's attractive, but really QC the output. Make sure it's value added. Make sure you have your own unique personality to it. And I had a lot of naysayers over the years. Well, Google says they don't care. Well, pretty much anything that Google says, do the opposite. Because yeah. And so now the other thing you can think about is, okay, well, if you run a bunch of prompts through Google's AI tool, now they know that it's not human created because they have the log of the output. Or Bing is a big investor in ChatGPT. Mm-hmm. So there's all these theories about, are they benchmarking content to then pay attention to where it goes? I didn't go too far down that theory, though I think it has some merit. But I think the biggest thing is not so much is, am I going to get punished by using AI, but the missed opportunity in providing a human touch. And the great example that I defer to is, AI doesn't know what it was like to have the childhood memory of going to your grandma's house on the holidays and smelling those cookies and all those things are associated with, or AI doesn't know what it's like to have its heart broken and the emotions that you can share with that. And so there's just another element. We now come full circle in this discussion where we talk about social media and giving out value and showcasing who you are. It's the same thing in blog content. If you can be vulnerable and transparent in content, the human element is what converts people. They'll follow you for your expertise, but they convert when they feel like they can trust you.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that so much. It's something that I can really resonate with. We just launched a brand new program called Online Profits AI. And this was something that I used AI for every single thing in the development of this program. But it still took me months to get this program together, because while I used AI to help develop it, every single script that we created for this was generated by me, was reviewed, updated, edited, and intertwined with all of my personal experiences, my stories, the things that I know to be true around these topics. And so if you can do that, you can still save a massive amount of time, because there's a ton of content in this program and it's really, really good content. So I did it a lot faster than I ever could have done it without AI. But I didn't let AI create this program. If I had, you would have ended up with the first draft of every single script that I did generate that was a nothing burger. It was without real value and spark and excitement. And I would have never been comfortable putting my name on anything like that, because it's not reflective of what I truly believe. And it was just missing that personal touch. So I think that's great advice. Definitely mixing in your own custom GPTs with your origin stories tied in there. All of those things can certainly make it a lot more personal without having to manually write every single thing. But I also really enjoy writing. And so being able to just do something that you like, if you do like it, is therapeutic at times. There's obviously so much that we could go into in terms of best practices, what to do, what not to do. If you just had to leave people with some final advice of, if you are either starting out in SEO or if you are really trying to go hard on your SEO, these are some things to really remember or focus on or do or not do. What would you say to them?
Yeah, I'm going to fully contradict myself. And if you're okay, I'll give a resource too.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say almost ignore everything that the majority of other SEOs say, because so much of it is fundamentally flawed. The problem with the SEO industry, probably marketing in general, is that somebody says something that they heard somebody else say, that they heard somebody else say, that they heard somebody else say. So what I mean is, I found success by just turning a deaf ear and figuring out, how to prove things myself, right? Does this work? Does this not work? And then building SOPs around what I touched with my own hands. Now, if what I've said resonates and you trust my judgment with my track record, then I have a free book. So you can go to freeseobook.com, and in the tradition of the conversation, it's all my processes. I just give it all away.
That's amazing. Well, I'm definitely going to check out that book myself. So I'm sure all of you guys should do the same. Anywhere else that people can find you, learn more about you, connect with you if they are interested in doing so?
Yeah, hit damonburton.com, whatever your social media preference of choice is, you'll find it there.
Awesome. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I have personally learned a lot. I'm sure everybody else has as well. And I will see you guys back on the next one. Bye-bye.